Wow, that film was well made, well acted, and translated Christian themes without sounding completely dogmatic or preachy. I wonder what the fine people of Letterboxd, who are always level headed and based in their opinions, have to say about this one. Whoops! Yeah, I know that opening joke might have been a little brash, so I'm just going to say let's talk about the film on its actual merit and not all the noise and chatter going on outside of it. Bonhoeffer is a film that I have not been all that familiar with up until recently. I saw a poster a couple of times, I think, at my local theater, but I had never seen a trailer and I was only vaguely familiar with the premise. I heard that it was only going to be in theaters for a week and my mom was interested in seeing it, so I figured, yeah, let's give it a chance and see how it is. And sure enough, I thought it was pretty decent. Now, this is a film distributed by Angel Studios, and this is a studio that has garnered a lot of controversy amongst a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, namely because of Sound of Freedom from last year, but that's a whole other side tangent we're not going to get into right now. But the main story follows Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a pastor in Germany during the era of Nazism in that country and of subsequently all of Europe during World War II. And basically, it's his story of how he recognized all of what they were doing to pervert the church and how he worked to resist that while also aiding in efforts to help Jewish people and at one point plot an assassination attempt against Hitler. Now, the title is kind of ridiculous if you ask me. Bonhoeffer, pastor, spy, assassin. Well, definitely he's a pastor. Sure, yeah, he acts as a spy. But assassin is kind of a loose term. Now, I'm not trying to spoil the movie or anything, but obviously this is based on history. And as we know with World War II, Hitler was not assassinated by anyone. And Bonhoeffer, the assassin part of this, was that he was a part of a plot to actually assassinate Hitler. So that's really all it's talking about with that. It's if you're going into this thinking that he started out as a pastor and then he became like a sniper, a mercenary, marksman, or something like that, that's not what this is about. It's simply him being involved in a plan to take out Hitler at one point. So to start off, I want to talk about the acting, because Jonas Dassler is an actor that I'm not familiar with. As I understand it, he is a German stage actor, and so this is really his big break in America, so to speak. And from what I saw, yeah, he's a pretty solid actor. I mean, he captured the emotion really well. There's some scenes where he really made me buy into his performance and his character. I was honestly kind of worried that this would be some, like, phoned in, not all that impressive performance. And while I wouldn't necessarily say this is like Oscar level or anything like that, this was at least somewhat believable and convincing enough for the story that they're telling. Also, Flula Borg is in this, and I think I remember hearing that he was in this movie at one point, but I forgot until I actually saw it. And his performance was very interesting because I've just never seen him in anything like this before. Granted, I think the only three things I've ever seen Flula Borg in were when he was the bad guy in Pitch Perfect 2, when he was Javelin in the Suicide Squad, and when he was the bartender in the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. So I'm not entirely enamored with his filmography, but seeing him in this showed me that, yeah, he can do serious roles. He's not just tagging along with whatever James Gunn is working on. A lot of other supporting roles in here that I thought were pretty good. Some performers not as good as others, but certainly serviceable to the plot. David Johnson from Alien Romulus is in this, and I didn't make the connection that that was actually the same actor until later in the film, but nonetheless, still cool to see him in other projects. I like him as an actor. I was impressed with him in Romulus, so nice to see him pop up in this as well. As a period piece biopic, I think this works well. Now, some people are kind of tired of biopics. I know I am, for one. I feel like a lot of these music biopics are kind of one note and repeating the same formula over and over again, just with a different musical artist. I think in some ways, Bonhoeffer borrows from the biopic structure, but at the same time, I was engaged from start to finish. I was really interested in this story, and I didn't think it was all that generic or boring. I thought that this was a really unique tale just because I didn't know anything about what actually happened during these events. So I was just enthralled by the story they were telling. Now, of course, Hollywood embellishes things. They always take their liberties. And who's to say how much of this is actually accurate? I suppose that's on the viewer to actually determine whether or not what they're seeing is legitimate, because you don't want to just be saying, like, oh, you're a historian because you watched X movie. Like, obviously, that's not going to be one to one. We need to do our research and vet what's actually out there entertainment wise. But in terms of a story, I think, setting all the history aside, this as a film, does it work? Is it powerful? Does it sell you on what it's doing? Yeah, I think so. If there's any criticism I could lob at the film from a technical standpoint, I would say that maybe it's just a little too long. It's 2 hours and 12 minutes. This isn't like a horrible runtime. It's like the average blockbuster at this point. But usually what happens when you have a film that goes north of 2 hours, you want to earn that runtime. And do I think Bonhoeffer earned that runtime? For the most part, I would say yes. It does seem to be a little slower paced in certain sections. And so yeah, it makes you wonder at certain points, like, okay, how much is left? How much have we accomplished? At one point I checked the time and I realized, oh man, it's only been an hour. They've done so much in an hour, which, props to the movie for covering a lot in that amount of time. But at the same time, it makes you wonder, like, maybe we should be further along in the film by now, and maybe the pacing is working against it. Pacing is an art. You can either nail it or completely botch it. And in this case, I don't think they totally screwed it up or anything, but they didn't exactly perfect it. I just think about this compared to something like Oppenheimer, which tackles a somewhat similar time period, and how Oppenheimer was a 3-hour movie, and yet I never felt 1 second of that runtime just because of how well paced and structured it was. I saw it 4 times in the theater, matter of fact, because I loved it that much and it was my favorite film of last year. With Bonhoeffer, this is a film where I feel like the pacing and the runtime might be enough to make me not rewatch it as often as something like Oppenheimer, despite being almost 50 minutes shorter. Also, if there's one other criticism I can lob at this film, it's that I feel like some of this gets a little bit over dramatic. Obviously, this is tackling a time period of just pure nightmare across the planet. And it's going to get heavy. It's going to get dramatic. But there's some scenes where I feel like, they were kind of playing it up a little bit too much, and just where it felt a little too Hollywood, if you know what I mean. There's just stuff where it's like, yeah, I don't know how realistic of dialogue that is, or would people actually act like that in that situation? Or is this one of those things where it's like, yeah, you're just looking for that award recognition? But if I'm being honest, this is just a film that I feel was very genuine about what it was doing, at least it came across that way. And now, for those of you wondering about this, yes, this is a film that implements Christian themes into its narrative, but at the same time, it's not so much a film like, the typical Christian film mockery catalog, the Kirk Cameron stuff, the God's Not Dead stuff. It's not one of those. It doesn't feel like one of those. This feels like a genuine, like, war period piece with the Christian themes sprinkled in because, the main character's a pastor. I don't know how you couldn't expect that to be in the film. And I also just really like how they're framing it, because it's not so much like condemning anyone who doesn't believe in Jesus or anything like that, which would obviously, turn away a lot of viewers who have differing religious viewpoints. But it's very much showcasing Nazi activity in Germany and what they were doing to the church, and how they basically were infiltrating religious institutions to propagate their dogma. They were modifying the Bible. They're adding 2 more commandments to the 10 commandments. They made Jesus Aryan and removed any of his Jewish ties and origin, which is like that. It's factual. Jesus was Jewish. So everything that they were doing in the church's eyes is blasphemous. It's heresy. And Bonhoeffer is up there in the pulpit shouting this out, saying, no man should be taking God's throne or modifying it in this way. And I don't know, I get the feeling that even if you weren't religious, you could at least get behind the fact of, opposing tyranny that is propagating themselves and infecting other institutions or religious sects in order to further their agenda. I mean, Nazis for generations, and I mean, still are to this day, were a common enemy for American patriotism and the world abroad as well. So I feel like this kind of topic and this kind of message is one that would bring people together as opposed to, being so controversial and divisive. And I think in terms of what they were going for, they did a good job of presenting this topic and showcasing Bonhoeffer's stance, his efforts, and everything that he was involved in. I found this to be a really compelling narrative. Bonhoeffer was a sympathetic protagonist, and I don't know, maybe someone in the comments is gonna rip me a new one because, oh, Bonhoeffer had this controversy that the movie didn't talk about. He was really doing this the whole time while also posing as the... I'm unaware of that. If you're going down to the comments right now to tell me how wrong I am because I enjoyed this film, listen, I'm judging the movie based on the movie, okay? I'm not judging it based on all these outside factors, and it is kind of bothersome to me that so many people I've seen on Letterboxd, hence my opening joke, were going to this film and just hitting it with a half-star review because they went to the Screen Unseen AMC showing last week and were mad when they saw an Angel Studios logo and walked out without even watching any part of the film. I don't feel like that's actual film discourse. That is bitterness, pettiness, and I'm not for that. I'm all about talking about movies regardless of what they're talking about, the topics they handle, and the people that make them. That is not the point. I want to judge the art strictly on its merit, not all these outside factors. Now, sometimes that gets hard when you have like controversial figures involved in the film, and I understand why some people may seem resistant to it, but when you are strictly judging a movie based on all these other outside factors that have nothing to do with the actual quality of the project, that's when things just get annoying, and I don't have any interest in talking about that. I'm talking about the movie, the art, what I just watched. Not everyone knows about everything in the tabloids. So pardon that side tangent, but I do feel like there's a lot of trivial discourse over certain things like this. I was even seeing this movie being called Israeli propaganda in one review. I don't know, man. This is a movie about a man who stood up to the Nazis and Adolf Hitler, and somehow this is being touted as right-wing conspiracy theorist propaganda. If that is truly how you define those terms, I would ask that you please read a history book. So if I can step off of this soapbox really quick, I'm going to just wrap it up by saying that I thought this movie was very enjoyable, had plenty of merit to it, and I don't understand why there's so much hate being lobbed at it. If you didn't like it, that's perfectly fine. I would love to discuss that with you in the comments below. Just be respectful about it, of course. This is just a movie after all, not the most important thing in the world. We can be civil when discussing art. It's okay. But for a final score out of 10, I'm going to give this one an 8. So Bonhoeffer, as I understand it, it was only in the theater for about a week, or at least it was at my theater. So I'm just curious, did any of you see it? What did you think about it? Again, like I said, comment down below, but be respectful of other people's opinions, regardless of where you stand. And if you like this review, then please like this video, subscribe if you want more videos like this in your feed, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to stay updated when I'm posting stuff. And for those interested, I do have a presence on Instagram, Letterboxd, Serialized, and Gigi, so if you'd like, you can go to the description of this video, click all those links, and give me a follow on all those platforms. I would greatly appreciate it, and it comes to you at no additional cost. And I bring this up because I post reviews on those very frequently, and not all of those make it onto this channel, so if you don't want to be waiting around for me to edit a video every single time you want to know my thought on a movie, TV show, or video game, then please give me a follow on all those platforms. I would greatly appreciate it, like I said. But until next time, guys, God be with you, and take care.